I've only been sort of marketing director or CMO or equivalent for the last 8 to 10 years now. But even going back that far, that was still when it was in the car crash hazy days. Things were slightly all over the shop. I think there was definitely back then quite a sort of lack of process. You could pile into certain markets. There were some channels available, whether it's affiliate or PPC or some of the early paid socials, where you literally just had to have the budget and a vaguely decent offering and you could get by. And the results were impressive enough for people not to necessarily have to push every granular tactic to get decent CPAs and decent LTVs. And between 10 years ago and now, it's become increasingly competitive, especially in the more regulated markets. So UK, the main European ones, more operators, all of whom have very significant budgets. And they're squeezing every marketing dollar or euro or pound. And with that became, as far as my perception goes, a need for professionalism, a need for process, and that greater accountability. And those people who really succeeded were not just number crunchers who could squeeze paid media and do acquisition. You had to have that brand capability as well. You had to have a product capability and product marketing ability to liaise with product teams and website teams and CRM teams and whoever else it was in the business that affected not just the customer acquisition, but the conversion and the retention of players. So I think the mandate for the CMOs in gaming became broader, and the need to be more process driven to basically drive the channels and increasingly seek out value became not just a nice to have, it was an absolute essential. So I think the industry as a whole has had to grow up in regulated market terms, and with that the capabilities of the CMOs involved had to do the same. So it's good for the industry, it's good for the individuals involved. I think people have had to sort of seek out and learn more proactively rather than the more gut instinct way of just following where the players were and piling in with money and running the numbers game. I think the requirement to be integrated strategically and tactically astute and being able to pivot both in terms of customer segments and in terms of seasonality and product type, all of these things came necessary if you were going to take advantage of those small slices of opportunity. So basically people have had to become better. It's become less easy, which probably means as a whole we're better marketers as a result. I don't know. I mean, I think the KPIs as they are, I don't necessarily think they've changed as such, but we've probably expanded on them. And on the same point as I made before, we've probably got more granular. So historically it was CPA, lifetime value, GP, or NGR, whichever one you want to look at. You acquire players at a low cost, you keep them for as long as possible, so the LTVs are high, and because of your margins, your GP was decent. And if you delivered that, you're probably onto a winner. Whereas now, the intricacies of every channel become more granular. You look at what your CRM is doing, but in terms of conversion, retention, and reactivation of players. You look at active player days, time on site, you look at game type and game preference. On the acquisition side, I think you're puppeteering your spends and your tactics and your creative and your offers much more frequently. And the pace of change is much more dramatic and noticeable. And as such, I think there's many more KPIs per channel than perhaps there would have been a few years ago. That's not to say there aren't the consistent ones. I mean, we still look at CPAs every day, and we still look at LTV every day, and we still look at GP every period, and we panic if any of those are doing particularly badly. But within the channels, I think everyone's got a bit more granular about how they look at it. The obvious one to lean on is regulatory compliance. Now, I think on one side, there's the positive, which is player protection. I think in the industry, everyone would accept that the longevity of gaming, both on and offline, is necessitated by player protection and looking after the customer first. With that come the compliance rules. Back in the day, it was talk about self-regulation. That doesn't appear to be necessarily the right answer, but the right answer hasn't been manifested on a regulatory or an operator level. So I think getting that right as an industry and becoming the grown-up industry that isn't chastised and vilified as being evil gambling, that is of paramount importance. And to marketers, those rules change all the time. We have to be able to change with them, maintain compliance, because the fines involved getting it wrong are so extraordinarily high, sometimes for good reason. But it does make it quite difficult. We can't just do what we want to do. We have to act properly, defend the brands, defend the customer, and look after the customer. And it makes it quite tricky when the rules change. So I think that's ongoing. And twin with that is the competitive environment. There's lots of money in gaming. That means lots of operators putting ever increasing amounts into the channels they're allowed to operate in. It makes it highly competitive. So you've got to have a very good product. You can't just get away with spending lots of money and crossing your fingers. You have to give a good product, good noise around a good brand, and treat your customers fairly. And that's kind of the only way you're going to guarantee success.